Yo, what is going on, guys? This is Black-Haired Foreigner, and today, for True and Tragic, is the crazy photographer who shocked Korea, Sik Lee. What comes in mind when you think about photographers? I personally imagine enthusiastic people who carefully observe their surroundings or explore around the globe to spot the perfect site and time to get a shot. However, today, you will hear a creepy story about a Korean photographer who went too far and shocked the nation. It was a cold winter's day on January 1983. Several boys were playing soldiers at Ho-At Mountain, Seoul, Korea. Then, all of a sudden, one of the boys had a target in sight, which looked like a mannequin. When they drew near the mannequin-like figure and had a close look, they couldn't believe their eyes. On the pile of leaves was a dead woman. The estimated time of her death was approximately a month before, and her body was frozen from tip to toe. Police investigators took her fingerprints, and she was identified as 24-year-old Kyung-hee Kim, who worked in a decadent barbershop in Seoul. Around the 1980s, decadent barbershops were common in Korea, where guests not only got haircuts, but also received erotic services from women. According to Miss Kim's autopsy results, she had no external injuries, which led the police assume that her cause of death was poison. The police regarded this case as a homicide because it would have been so odd if Miss Kim had ended her own life by climbing up a mountain and consuming poison on such a cold day. They started off by checking Miss Kim's own kind, and one person stood out. It was a regular customer of the barbershop she worked in, who was 42-year-old Sik Lee, an amateur photographer as well as a plumber, who had won lots of awards in photo contests and even held private photo exhibitions. He was also a member of the Photographers Association. When the police went to his house, Mr. Lee said he only knew Miss Kim for about 3 weeks after first meeting her at the barbershop. The police were curious about Mr. Lee's photos, so Mr. Lee showed them his works. Among the hundreds of photos were photos of nude women posing as victims tied on sticks or stabbed by knives. Most of them appeared fake though, and Mr. Lee explained that he was currently focusing on the subject of death as an art. Because his second wife, who was also seen in the photos, was well alive, the cops had no choice but to believe his story. The police kept looking on his works, when all of a sudden they noticed Mr. Lee quickly hiding one of the photos. They took it back from him and examined it. It was a photo of a woman lying on a pile of leaves who seemed identical to Miss Kim. The police had a hunch and searched his house. Then, inside the basement, they finally obtained 20 more additional photos of Miss Kim. But this time, the photos were not just Miss Kim lying down, but were time-sequenced photos of her dying in pain. Mr. Lee was arrested for murder, but he denied his charges and claimed that the photos were not real, and she was acting it out like the rest of his photos. He told the investigators that Miss Kim was simply posing as a model for his photo works at Ho-At Mountain, and after taking her photos, he left the mountain without her, and she was doing just fine at that time. But when the investigators zoomed in the photos, they observed her skin hairs were gradually tilting down photo after photo, which can be observed when people die. This way, they were able to prove that Mr. Lee took the photos as she was actually dying of poison. Prosecutors believe that Mr. Lee lured Miss Kim by convincing her that she could become a famous model if she posed for him at Ho-At Mountain. Miss Kim accepted his tempting offer, and on December 14, 1982, she followed him to Ho-At Mountain. There, Mr. Lee gave her a pill containing potassium cyanide, which she consumed believing that it was a cold medicine, as he told her. Soon she felt something was terribly wrong, but it was too late. Pain struck her body like nothing had before, and she collapsed on the ground searching for mercy, but the only thing Mr. Lee did was take photos of her passing out. The helpless woman was killed by Mr. Lee's erroneous view of art and selfish nature. Although Mr. Lee denied his accusation, he was sentenced to death and was executed on May 27, 1986, in Seoul Prison. He was the last criminal to be executed in Seoul Prison when it was located in Sarimun. True and tragic. See you in the next video.